Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Neha Aneja from Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Today we are going to discuss about a module, Women and Disability Laws. This module is a part of the paper Women and the Law for the subject Women Studies. The learning objectives of this module are to analyze the socio-economic and legal status of the women with disability in India, understand international legal framework related to the women with disabilities, to understand the Indian legal framework related to women with disabilities, and to examine the concerning issues related to the rights of women with disabilities. Persons with disabilities are most disadvantaged section of society. They suffer enormous discrimination regarding access to education, employment, etc. They often lack the opportunities of mainstream population and are usually among the most marginalized in society. Being female and having a disability, whether serious or not, is usually enough to put the individual in a very disadvantaged situation. Women with physical or mental disability are often denied equal enjoyment of their human rights. In particular, by virtue of the lesser status ascribed to them by tradition and custom, or as a result of overt or covert discrimination. The Constitution of India premised on the principle of social justice and human rights. It mandates the state to accord justice and equality to all members of the society in all the facets of human activities. But before the enactment of the Rights of Person with Disability Act 2016, which provides a gender-sensitive law, the legislation including the Persons with Disability Equal Opportunity, Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act 1995 covered all respective issues of disability but remained silent on discrimination and violence faced by women with disability that differentiate their situation from men with disabilities. Women with disabilities. Girls and women of all ages with any form of disability are among the most vulnerable and marginalized group of society. Despite their significant numbers, they remain hidden and silent, their concerns unknown and their rights unrecognized. Women with disability carry society's cross on their backs and they face triple discrimination because of their disabilities, gender, and poverty. They are commonly stereotyped as sick, helpless, childlike, dependent, incompetent, and asexual, greatly limiting their options and opportunities. They are subjected to physical, psychological, sexual, and financial violence, neglect, social isolation, trafficking, institutionalization, degradation, detention, denial of health care, and forced sterilization and forced psychiatric treatments. They are at high risk of gender-based and other form of violence based on social stereotypes and biases that attempt to dehumanize them. Violence against them occurs in various spheres including in home and community. The force of violence to which women and girls with disabilities are subjected are varied and represent intersectional and multiple discrimination based on gender and disability. Across the globe, forced sterilization is performed on young girls and women with disabilities for various purposes, including practice of population control, menstrual management, personal care, and pregnancy prevention, including pregnancy that result from sexual abuse. The practice of forced sterilization has been debated and justified by governments, legal, medical, and other professionals and family members and carers as being in the best interest of women and girls with disabilities. However, arguments for their best interest often have little to do with the rights of women and girls with disabilities and more to do with social factors such as avoiding inconvenience to caregivers, the lack of inadequate measures to protect against the sexual abuse and exploitation of women and girls with disabilities, and the lack of adequate and appropriate services to support women with disability in their decision to become parents. Systematic prejudice and discrimination against them continues to result in widespread denial of their right to experience their sexuality, to have the sexual relationships, and to found and maintain families. The educational arena is also part of a larger picture of double discrimination based on gender. Women and girls with disabilities are less in educational arena than either their disabled male or non-disabled female counterparts. Further, in employment, women with disabilities often experience unequal hiring and promotion standards, unequal access to training and retraining, unequal access to credit and other productive resources, unequal pay for equal work, and occupational segregation. Moreover, disabled women are less likely than disabled men to make use of many exciting social services, including residential services, due to social, cultural, and religious factors. The problem that confront women with disabilities are even more severe in rural areas due to lack of information, awareness, education, income, and contact, resulting in extreme isolation and invisibility. Crime against disabled girls and women are also frequently go unreported because they and their families have no courage or strength to report these to police. Public awareness about such matters consequently remains low and follow-up actions on their behalf does not take place. The situation of women with disabilities in respect of access to justice and protection from abuse is also aggravated by the impact of combined effects of both gender and disability. They even lack access to legal protection and representation, as law enforcement mechanism and national level legislation policies are all ill-equipped to address their issues. Although some progress has been made in improving the status of women in general, disabled women have remained a largely ignored group. Equality of opportunity and treatment for women has yet to be achieved in most societies. International Legal Framework for Protection of Rights of Women with Disabilities, Human Rights Instruments and Treaties. Prior to drafting of disabilities conventions, there was no international treaty dealing specifically with human rights issues of persons with disabilities. The equality clauses of three central human instruments of UN, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Convention for Civil and Political Rights 1966, and International Covenant for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights 1966 do not mention disability as a protected category. If disability is addressed as human rights issue in these documents, it is only in connection with social security and preventive health policy. In addition to these three universal treaties, the United Nations General Assembly has enacted four hard laws treaties protecting people based specific identity characteristics unrelated to disability: the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Convention on the Rights of Child, the International Convention on the Protection of Rights of All Migrant Workers and members of their families. Among these treaties, only CRC contains a specific disability article. It requires the state parties to recognize the rights of the children with disability to enjoy full and decent lives and participate in their communities. United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities UNCRPD hereinafter. In December 2006, the UN adopted Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities elaborating in detail the rights of persons with disabilities and setting out a code of implementation. The international treaty is seen as marking a paradigm shift from charity-based approach which views persons with disabilities as object of charity, medical treatment and protection to a right-based approach of seeing them as subject capable of claiming their right and making benefit of. The new approach is that the disability proclaimed to be a mainstream issue and their status will be reflected in national assessment of development and poverty reduction strategies and corresponding international frameworks. Article 1 of the UNCRPD defines persons with disabilities as those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual or sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. The purpose of the convention is to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights by the persons with disabilities, depending upon their needs and situations. It covers a number of key areas such as accessibility, personal mobility, rehabilitation, and participation in political life, etc. The UNCRPD has also engaged with issue of multiple discrimination faced by women with disability by incorporating a dedicated article on women with disabilities, and simultaneously gender concerns have been addressed in certain other articles of UNCRPD on issue of special concern to disabled women. Article 6 of UNCRPD provides that state parties must recognize that women and girls with disability face multiple discrimination and must take all appropriate measures to ensure their full development, advancement and empowerment and for the enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms set forth UNCRPD. Apart from this special article, gender concerns find mentioned in the preamble and in article related to general principle article 3 clause G, awareness raising article 8 clause B, freedom from exploitation, violence and abuse article 16, health article 25 and adequate standards of living and social protection article 28 clause 2 subclause B. India ratified the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability in September 2007. It came into force on 3rd May 2008 and makes it obligatory on the part of government to revise the laws or legal provision with the terms of the convention. Legal framework for the protection of rights of person with disability in India. Constitutional provisions. The preamble, the directive principles of state policy and fundamental rights enriched in the Constitution stand testimony to the commitment of the state to its people. Although, according to entry 9 in the list 2 of Schedule 7 of the Constitution, the subject of relief to the disabled and unemployable is responsibility of the state governments. In practice, the central government also has a major role to play in this field. The Constitution, while protecting equality under Article 14, 15 and 16, does not include disability as one of the categories of non-discrimination. Article 14 mandates that the state shall not deny to any person equality before the law or equal protection of laws within the territory of India. Article 15 of the Constitution of India prohibits the state from discriminating on the basis of sex. The article, however, contains a proviso stating that nothing in this article shall prevent state from making special provisions for women. Article 16 lays down that the state shall not discriminate on the basis of sex with regard to equality of opportunity in the matters of employment. Though the fundamental rights listed above in a way do not have a specific mention of physically handicapped or disabled, yet they do pertain to the socially, economically, and educationally backward class of the people. The only mention of protection of persons facing disability and sickness is made in the Directive Principles of State Policy in Chapter 4 of the Constitution. Article 39A enjoins the state to promote justice on the basis of equal opportunities and to provide free legal aid by suitable legislation or scheme in any other way to ensure that opportunities for securing justice are not denied to any citizen by reason of economic or other disabilities. Under Article 39, it is also imposing a positive obligation on the state to endeavor to improve the status of women by providing for equal treatment of women and men in policies of state. Article 41 enjoins that state shall, within the limit of its economic capacity and development, make effective provision for securing the right to work, to education, to public assistance in cases of unemployment, old age, sickness and disablement. More specifically, Article 46 stipulate that state shall promote with special care the educational and economic interest of the weaker sections of the people and in particular of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and shall protect them from social injustice and all form of exploitation. These provisions envisage a very positive role for the state in the upliftment of the status of disadvantaged groups. It is important to clarify here that fundamental rights under Part 3 of the Constitution of India are meant for citizens and are enforceable in courts. Individual can move to court seeking legal assistance if fundamental rights are violated by force. On the other hand, the directive principle of state policy in Chapter 4 of the Constitution are not enforceable, but under Article 37, it's duty of the state to implement these principles in the governance of country and in making laws. Specific legislation. The Rights of Person with Disability Act 2016, in order to incorporate the significant provisions enriched in the UNCRPD 2006 in our national legal framework, Indian Parliament has passed the Rights of Person with Disability Act 2016, hereinafter RPWD Act. It came into force on 19th April 2017 and repealed the Person with Disability Equal Opportunity Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act 1995. It is a principal and comprehensive legislation concerning disabled persons. It has 17 chapters dealing with various issues. The Act has categorized persons with disabilities into three categories: persons with disability, person with benchmark disability, and person with disability having high support needs. Section 2, Clause S defines person with disability as a person with long-term physical, mental, intellectual or sensory impairment which in interaction with barrier hinders his full and effective participation in society equally with others. Further, Section 2 Clause R defines person with benchmark disability. It means a person with not less than 40% of a specified disability, where specified disability has not been defined in measurable term and includes a person with disability where specified disability has been defined in a measurable term as certified by certifying authority. Section 2, Clause T. Person with disability having high support needs means a person with benchmark disability certified under Clause A of subsection 2 of Section 58 who needs high support. Under RPWD Act, 21 types of disabilities have been covered, and furthermore, the central government has the power to add more types of disabilities. Covered disabilities are blindness, low vision, leprosy cured person, hearing impairment, deaf or hard hearing, locomotor disability, dwarfism, intellectual disability, mental illness, autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, chronic neurological conditions, specific learning disabilities, multiple sclerosis, speech and learning disability, thalassemia, hemophilia, multiple disabilities including deaf blindness, acid attack victims, and Parkinson disease. Chapter 2, Sections 3 to 15 of the Act proclaim the rights and entitlements of the persons with disabilities. The Act contains provisions for each essential sphere of life of persons with disabilities such as education, employment, security, health, access to justice, cultural activities, sporting activities, rehabilitation and recreation, etc. It assures full and effective participation and inclusion of the persons with disabilities in society. Furthermore, it requires the appropriate government to take all necessary steps for reasonable accommodation to ensure to persons with disabilities the enjoyment or exercise of rights equally with others. Para D of Preamble to the Act emphasized to provide respect and acceptance for difference of person with disabilities as a part of human diversity and humanity. Along with that, it also provides certain specific provisions for the protection of rights of women with disabilities and also assures gender equality to women with disabilities. For example, it mandates the appropriate government and local authorities to take measures to ensure that women and children with disabilities enjoy their rights equally with others. It also requires the appropriate government to take consideration of diversity of disability, gender, age and socio-economic status while devising any scheme and program for persons with disabilities. The Rehabilitation Council of India Act 1992. Under this Act, the Rehabilitation Council of India has been constituted, which is the government body to regulate training programs and courses targeted at disabled, disadvantaged, and special education requirement communities. It is the only statutory council in India that is required to maintain the Central Rehabilitation Register, which mainly contains documents detail of all qualified professionals who operate and deliver training and educational programs for the targeted communities. In the year 2000, the Rehabilitation Council of India Act 2000 was introduced and notified consequently by the Government of India. The amendment brought definitions and discussions provided within the earlier Rehabilitation Council of India Act 1992 under the ambit of larger act, namely a Right to Person with Disability Act 2016. The National Trust for Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities Act 1999, as certain groups among disabled are more vulnerable than others, a special enactment for the protection of such persons, their property and well-being was felt necessary. The enactment of this act aims to fulfill a common demand of families seeking reliable arrangement for their severely disabled ward. The specific objective of the Act are to enable and empower persons with disabilities to live as independently and as fully as possible within and as close to the community to which they belong, to promote measures for the care and protection of persons with disabilities in the event of death of their parents or guardian, and to extend support to registered organization to provide need based services during the period of crisis in the family of disabled covered under this act. The Mental Health Act 2017. The Mental Health Act predates the human rights emphasis and can be described as a civil rights legislation. It provides for mental health care and services for persons with mental illness and to protect, promote, and fulfill the rights of such persons during delivery of mental health care and services and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Right to education. In the era of 21st century, the right to education has been considered to be one of the most valuable rights. Education is the most effective vehicle of social and economic empowerment. But millions of children with disabilities worldwide are deprived of the right to attend school because of inaccessible schools, inadequately trained teachers, or lack of awareness among parents and school staff. Moreover, women and girls with disabilities are less well in educational arena than either their disabled male or non-disabled female counterparts. The combination of discrimination on basis of both gender and disability results in low literacy for women and girls with disabilities. Rights of women with disability and concerning issues. These are some of the basic rights of women with disabilities which have been recognized in the international and national legal instruments. Article 24 of UNCRPD ensures the right of person with disability to education. Article 21 capital A of the Indian Constitution guarantees education as fundamental right. Further, right to education of persons with disabilities has been recognized under Right to Person with Disability Act. Section 31 of the Act provides provision for free education for children with benchmark disabilities between the age of 6 to 18 years, and it also enjoins upon authorities to ensure appropriate environment for it. Moreover, under Chapter 3 of the Act, a positive duty has also been casted on appropriate governments to promote inclusive education as well as special school for children with disabilities. Right to employment. Employment is a critical element of independent living, but it is a major concern for persons with disabilities as most of the persons with disabilities are either unemployed or underemployed. People with disabilities in general face difficulties in entering the open labor market. But seen from a gender perspective, men with disabilities are almost twice as likely to have jobs as women with disabilities. Women with disabilities seeking employment faced the double discrimination of gender and disability. Employers regard women with disability as unproductive workers who are unable to adjust to the workplace. Moreover, when women with disability work, they often experience unequal hiring and promotion standards, unequal access to training and retraining, unequal access to credit and other productive resources, unequal pay for equal work, and occupational segregation. And they rarely participate in economic decision making. Right to employment and opportunities of persons with disabilities has been recognized under Article 27 of UNCRPD. The significance of work and employment has been acknowledged in the Constitution of India under Article 16 and right to equality of opportunity in matters of employment. It accords similar opportunity to persons with disabilities under Article 39 of Indian Constitution. It has also been mandated to the state to direct its policy towards securing equal right to an adequate means of livelihood, equal pay for equal work for both men and women. Similarly, Section 24 of the RPWD Act requires the appropriate government to formulate schemes and programs to safeguard and promote the rights of persons with disabilities for adequate standard of living to enable them to live independently or in the community. These schemes and programs include provisions of loan at concessional rates to facilitate and support employment of persons with disabilities, especially for their vocational training and self-employment. It also guarantees the equality of opportunity and non-discrimination in employment to the persons with disabilities. Further, Section 34 of RPWD Act confers special and preferential right on person with benchmark disability in government employment, and inter alia provides 4% reservation of vacancies for person with benchmark disabilities. Right to barrier-free environment. Accessibility is considered as a wide concept that includes the prevention and elimination of obstacles that pose problems for persons with disabilities in using products, services, and infrastructure. Barrier-free environment enables people with disability to move about safely and freely and use the facilities within the built environment. Article 9 of UNCRPD mandates to state parties to undertake appropriate measures to ensure equal access for persons with disabilities to the physical environment, transportation, information and communication, including information and communications technologies, internet and other facilities and services open or provided to the public both in urban and in rural areas. There is no express provision in the Constitution guaranteeing the right to accessibilities. Accessibility can be implied from the constitutional promise of equality of status and opportunity to all since without accessibility the various rights guaranteed by the Constitution have little meaning for the person with disabilities. However, access without discrimination to public facilities, road, places of culture, and entertainment for persons with disabilities came into the focus only with the enactment of Person with Disabilities Equal Opportunity, Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act 1995. Thereafter, Right to Person with Disability Act lays down duties on the government authorities in very clear terms for the creation of the barrier-free facilities within the limit of their economic capacity. Section 40 to 46 of RPWD Act specifically requires appropriate government to take suitable measures to provide access to transport, information and communication technology, existing infrastructure and premises, consumer goods and other facilities and services provided to the public in urban and rural areas. Moreover, Section 11 of RPWD Act mandates the Election Commission of India and the state election commissions shall ensure that all polling stations are accessible to persons with disability and all materials related to electoral process are easily understandable by and accessible to them. Right to be protected against violence, abuse and exploitation. Violence and abuse are serious problems for persons with disabilities, especially for women with disabilities, who are at greater risk than non-disabled persons. Women with disabilities tend to be more vulnerable to exploitation of various kinds, such as sexual harassment, domestic violence, and exploitation in the workplace. They also tend to be relatively easy targets of social exploitation, particularly if they are mentally retarded. They are the easy prey for exploitation within the family because of relative isolation in which women and disability live. The potential for physical and emotional abuse is high. At same time, and because of their isolation, women with disabilities are likely to have fewer resources to turn to for help. The UNCRPD has recognized the increased vulnerability of women and disability to abuse and exploitation by explicitly includes the gender aspect of freedom from exploitation, violence and abuse under Article 16. In India, Section 6 of Right to Person with Disability Act requires appropriate government to take measures to protect persons with disabilities from being subjected to torture, cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment. It also mandates that no person with disability shall be a subject of any research without his or her free informed consent obtained through accessible modes. Further, Section 7 of Right to Person with Disability Act specifically provides protection from abuse, violence and exploitation to the person with disabilities. The Act also laid down that persons with disability have equal protection and safety in situations of risk, armed conflict, humanitarian emergencies, and natural disasters. Along with all these provisions, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 is already in place to protect women who face domestic violence, but there is a need to provide gender specific measures to ensure protection of women with disabilities from abuse, violence, and exploitation. Amendments may also be made in Domestic Violence Act 2005 to ensure that the protection provided is accessible to women with disabilities. Right to integrity and legal capacity. Under Article 17 of UNCRPD, it has been recognized that every person with disability has a right to respect for his or her physical and mental integrity on the basis on the equal basis with others. The right to integrity is basically the right about respecting the personhood of individual and ensuring that she is able to exercise her fundamental rights. Self-determination is an important issue for women with disabilities. This right also ties with a number of other aspects relevant for disabled women. For example, in relation to health, it is significant in the context of right to choose, respect for consent, autonomy, etc. This right is also relevant in context of protection from abuse. Thus, the recognition of right to integrity specifically for women with disabilities is necessary in relation to guarantee of these other rights and entitlements. Further, Article 12 of UNCRPD recognizes the legal capacity of persons with disabilities on equal basis with others. The recognition of legal capacity is the foundation of current disability movement and for a shift to right-based approach. Failure to recognize the autonomy and legal capacity of women with disability heightens their vulnerability. For example, in case of forced sterilization, in the absence of recognition of legal capacity, the consent and choice of disabled women will not be respected. In Indian law, these rights may be covered under Article 21 of Indian Constitution, which is guaranteeing right to life. Along with that, para a and Para B of Preamble to RPWD Act specifically proclaimed that persons with disability have the right to inherent dignity, individual autonomy, including the freedom to make one's own choices and independence of persons. Under this act, the appropriate government is legally obliged to ensure that person with disabilities enjoys the right to equality, life with dignity and respect for his or her integrity equally with others. Furthermore, Section 13 Clause 2 of the Act requires the appropriate government to ensure that persons with disability enjoy legal capacity on equal basis with others in all aspects of life and have right to equal recognition everywhere as any other person before the law. In addition to this, Section 14 declares that every guardian appointed under any provision of any other law for the time being in force for a person with disability shall be deemed to function as a limited guardian. Right to privacy. Article 22 of UNCRPD guarantees the right to privacy. This protection has a wide ambit which include privacy in family, home, correspondence, honor and reputation and personal health and rehabilitation information. All these facets of the right to privacy are significant in relation to women with disabilities as issues of both bodily and sexually privacy are important for them. In India, again, it may be covered under Article 21 of Indian Constitution. Along with this, Section 13, Clause 5 of RPWD Act states that any person providing support to the person with disability shall not exercise undue influence and shall respect his or her autonomy, dignity and privacy. Right to home and family. Society undervalues women with disabilities by considering them as non sexual, not suitable for marriage, and incapable as mother. Because of such misconception, they are less likely to get married. If they do get married, generally it is a compromised arrangement. Moreover, across the globe, they have been forced or coerced by medical personnel to submit to permanent and irreversible sterilization procedures. It is a systematic prejudice and grave violation of human rights of women and girls with disabilities and can be described as acts of torture, cruelty, inhumanity and degrading treatment. It results in widespread denial of their right to experience their sexuality, to have sexual relationships, and to found and maintain families, which may lead to extreme social isolation and lifelong grief. Article 23 of UNCRPD requires the state parties to take effective and appropriate measures to eliminate discrimination against persons with disabilities in all matters relating to marriage, family, parenthood, relationships on equal basis with others. This right to marry, family and home also comes under Article 21 of Indian Constitution. In addition to that, Section 5 of RPWD Act states that the persons with disability shall have the right to live in the community and they are not obliged to live in any particular living arrangement. Further, Section 9 of RPWD Act lays down that no child with disability shall be separated from his or her parents on the ground of disability, except on an order of competent court if required in the best interest of the child. The right to family has been strengthened by Section 10, which prohibits any medical procedure which leads person with disability to infertility without his or her free and informed consent. Right to health. Women with disabilities of all ages often have difficulty with physical access to health services. Article 25 of UNCRPD requires that states parties shall take all appropriate measures to ensure access for persons with disabilities to health services that are gender sensitive, including health related rehabilitation. This right to health again comes under Article 21 of Indian Constitution. Along with that, Section 25 of Right to Person with Disability Act also requires the appropriate government and local authorities to take measures and make schemes or programs to promote healthcare and prevent the occurrence of disabilities. Moreover, Section 25 Clause 2, Subclause K of the Act specifically obliged the appropriate government and local authorities to promote the sexual and reproductive health care for women with disability. Conclusion. Women with disabilities are amongst the most marginalized and disadvantaged people in the world. The intersection of gender inequality and disability presents a situation of multiple levels of discrimination. They are less likely to be educated, employed, and well housed than almost any other population group. They have not only been invisible in international development frameworks but also in international human rights treaties until the adoption of UNCRPD. There was no legally binding international law that was dealing with women with disabilities as requiring protection, which has also been ratified by India. Recently, in line with UNCRPD, India has passed the Rights of Person with Disability Act 2016, which has incorporated gender concern prevailing in India. Now, there is a need to adopt such implementation strategies to ensure that women with disabilities are not neglected from policies and programs. Thank you.